Nothing about anything I do is traditional. So when I came in with my like lo-fi beats for warm-ups, there was a lot of like looking around the room, like, what are we doing right now? I'm like, hey, this is nuts and bolts. This is Arbin's exercises. This is the Remington warm-up, just with a beat. All right, it's nothing crazy. It's just a new way to conceptualize these ideas. And so when I talk to my students about what they want to do for a career, they're like, music ed, I'm going to go student teach when I graduate, and then I'm going to be a band director. I'm like, okay, well, you could do this. You could go down this route. You could be like a more of a performer, arranger. A lot of what it is, I'm just trying to show them that there's so much more that you can do. Not that I'm going to change the culture here, but I think I'm going to show people that you can do some other entrepreneurial kind of ventures and make a career out of it.
This is Music Maker with Tyler Kline, a podcast from Loose Leaf Transmissions. Hey there, how's it going? Welcome to the show today. Tyler here, and I'm really glad to be with you, and today I'm joined by composer and tuba player Brett Copeland. Now, you gotta know that Brett is a very good buddy of mine from grad school who does amazing things in the worlds of tuba and music composition, and actually we were also roommates for a year, so I'm just bringing that up because Brett is someone I know pretty well. We live together, after all. But also there are so many things in this conversation that I learned about Brett for the very first time that I think you're going to like. Dr. Brett Copeland is a tuba player, educator, composer, and music technologist who holds the position of Associate Adjunct Professor of Tuba and Euphonium at the University of Northern Iowa, where he teaches applied lessons, low brass techniques, directs the UNITUBA ensemble, and teaches a course on electronic composition. In this conversation, Brett and I cover a lot of ground. I ask him to share how he thinks about tuba and electronics and how that is different from maybe how most tuba players might think of it. We reminisce about hanging out with friends at lunch in grad school and how that actually impacted Brett's musical thinking, how a composer might leverage AI to break out of their comfort zone, and what it's like returning to his undergrad now as a professor. Brett is one of my all-time favorite people, and I am very excited to share this discussion with you. So just some business to share before we jump into this conversation. One of the simplest and really and truly the best way for you to support this podcast is by listening to this episode, listening to earlier episodes, and then giving us a follow on your favorite streaming platform. That'll ensure that you get the newest episode as soon as it's released every Saturday morning, pushed straight to your device. You can support what we're doing here and get early access to episodes by becoming a Patreon subscriber for only $5 a month. And yes, that little bit of support goes a long way in helping me cover the cost of some of the tools that I'm using to produce this podcast. And if an ongoing donation just isn't your thing, I've also got a one-time link for you to make a one-time donation along with that Patreon link on our website. That's looseleaftransmissions.com/support. You can also visit looseleaftransmissions.com/musicmaker to access a transcript of today's discussion, as well as helpful links and other information related to this episode. And finally, an impactful and even better, a free way to help the Music Maker podcast is, like I said, to follow us on your favorite streaming app, and also by leaving a rating and a review if you feel so inclined. The more of those that we have, the more visibility the podcast has, and the more listeners we'll have. Thanks so much for checking all those things out. And now, here's my conversation with Brett Copeland. It's been maybe too long since we've had a chance to talk, and so I'm really excited to do this now and also get to find out a little more about your artistry and your process. So thanks for your time today.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here, man. It's great to talk to you.
Yeah. You know, we've known each other for about 10 years now, which is wild to think about. And we were even roommates at one point, so we've been quite close for some time. And one thing I don't really know about you is how you became interested and being a composer. So I'd like to start this off by asking, what is your earliest artistic memory as a composer?
So, question for you, does high school garage band
Yeah,
start,
let's
like,
hear
count?
it.
Okay.
That counts. Yeah.
So I was in bands in actually in middle school and then in high school. That was, I guess, the start of my career, like, making music with just my buddies, and it was really fun, and then looking back, it was, like, 15 years ago, 20 years ago now, I'm like, "Oh, that was actually a pretty productive point in my life, writing songs with my friends." I mean, we were doing, like, covers, Blink-182, Sum 41, that ilk, but great music, and then we started writing our own stuff, and it was really fun, and I enjoyed it, and I realized that was the first time where I was losing track of days. Like, I go over to my buddy John's house, we get into his garage, he was, like, a metal guy, so we, like, played metal stuff, he had, like, weights in his garage, but suddenly, like, the day it was, like, dark outside. I'm like, "Okay," so we spent that entire day just kind of writing riffs, trying to record things into Fruity Loops. It's like, can I do this forever? Is this a thing I can do and try to make money off of?
Yeah.
So that was really what started, like punk, heavy metal, playing in bands.
So you are a tuba player, and we're going to talk a lot about that
Oh
soon.
yeah,
But
no, yeah.
what did you play in the? Obviously, you didn't. Maybe you played tuba. I don't know.
No, no tuba at that point. I was playing bass and singing.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah,
I was a bass player at that point in my life,
yeah, that's
and
pretty cool.
doing similar stuff. So a lot of
Were you in
parallels
like
there.
a band, like cover band
Yeah,
type thing?
yeah. So yeah, we I was in a band. I think my senior year of high school called the All Right Articles, and it
Yeah,
was like me and just some other friends of mine who were in like band, like school band. You know, I was a euphonium player. There's a French horn player in the band who would play guitar, a trumpet player who would play guitar and sing. You know, it's like we weren't playing, band music. But it's funny because that was my first, not my first, but like the first time I really got into like mixing and recording and editing audio. And so for me, it's the same kind of thing. I look back at that time and be like, "Whoa, I was actually doing this thing like before I thought I was," you know?
exactly. And the same thing, like in Fruity Loops, you could put like effects on the vocal, like, oh, this is really cool. What is a ring modulation actually doing? And then looking up, you're like, oh, I don't understand this yet, but it's cool. So that was like the start of it. And it's fun that you said that they were in band as well, because I kind of lived in two different worlds, like the cool kids world, like skipping school to go do stuff, and then like coming back to school to go practice tuba. The kids that were in the band, like the like garage band stuff, they kind of made fun of the actual band, and I'm sitting there like, I really love playing the tuba too. I think both things are cool. Can they both exist? And so you said, what was the name of your band? The All Right
The
Articles.
All Right
That's
Articles, yeah.
I was
I was recruited into that. I'm not sure I would have named it that, but actually it was kind of a fun
It's
little
not
name.
bad. It's a good
Yeah,
band name.
yeah.
Trying to think, like, we had the Astro Cats. That was a good one. Battery, Hazard, Army of Angels. Just like terrible band names, but really good people. It
Yeah.
was fun.
How sophisticated do you feel like you got the music, or was it just like school talent shows and putting stuff on MySpace, you know?
Yeah, it was that level. Like, I think we were all individually decent at the instruments, but we were just mainly having fun. There wasn't like the high level. It wasn't like Radiohead, when they were in college trying to like
Yeah, right.
get everything right. It wasn't like that level yet.
Yeah,
But
gotcha.
yeah.
So you grew up in Iowa in the Midwest,
Yeah,
right?
that
Yeah.
would be yeah, Midwest emo was a big thing for us.
Oh, that's all.
That's probably
That,
part of it. Yeah.
that's a big thing for me
Yeah.
personally now. So
Current day. Yeah.
yeah, current day. Yeah, so you grew up in Iowa, and you're back in Iowa now, and we're going to talk about that
We
a little bit
back.
later on. You're
Yeah.
back. You're representing. But I'm wondering, did you have any interaction with composers during your formative years as a musician, when you were in something like high school band, or is that something that came a little bit later on in your life?
Good question. The first thing that popped into my head was, not to brag, but I was in the Iowa All-State band a couple years. But one of the years was Frank Kelly was the conductor. and we were playing his piece. And Frank Kelly, I mean, to this day, is still like high school band, like Mount Rushmore. And back in the day, I think Vesuvius had just dropped. We might have been playing Vesuvius or the other one that's based on the Gershwin piece. It's not
Blue
Rhapsody.
Shades.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Blue Shades, yeah.
I think we were playing that piece. But listening to him talk, like, like a high school clarinetist asking him a question about the piece, like how this little riff should go. And the fact that he was like so invested in every minuscule part of his music still, it's like, oh, it's interesting. Composers that are alive, because you play stuff from like people that have long since passed,
Right.
and you don't get to like hear what they think about their music. But listening to Frank Kelly talk about his piece, it's like, oh, this guy's like super invested in this still. Like he really cares. He loves this music that he wrote. That was my first like eye opening. Like, oh, living composers. That's a thing. You can play music, and you can like write music and go around and do this whole thing.
Yeah.
So he was the first one, oddly enough.
Yeah, I mean, it's not surprising because I remember playing his music in wind band in high school, as a freshman. And I think worth pointing out is as people, as musicians, you and I who came up in the wind band world, wind band is much friendlier to living composers than orchestras. Especially I think more elementary school, middle school, high school level orchestras, right? So in that regard, yeah, I think we're fortunate.
Yeah. We get to like actually interface with some of the composers that are writing music. And now there's like even a bigger trend of beginning bands writing music by living composers, which is like a really, if you like that music, if you like writing that kind of music, such a great career path. Like writing beginning band pieces, especially if you know like how those bands operate and what really works well for them. Speaking from the tuba player mindset, I really appreciate some of these newer beginning band composers because the tuba parts are more exciting, they're more rhythmic, and you're going to encourage tuba players to actually develop those skills a lot earlier rather than just be bored and being annoying in rehearsal because they got
The
nothing to
big
do.
goose eggs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, the tuba parts are exciting. So
That's
I like
great.
that.
I'm glad to hear that because I'm a little disconnected from that world at this point in my life.
I mean,
Though
I
I
was
know,
too.
although I know it's a cash cow for composers,
Yeah,
like you
I
said.
think it could be. But like living in Texas and working in public schools, I was teaching at a bunch of different high school, middle school clusters. And so I would go down and work with like the beginning tuba euphonium players and looking at their band music and like, oh, this is pretty fun, actually. Nice. I'm glad that this is more exciting than it was when I was learning the instrument.
Sure.
So it's good for them.
One thing that I've always associated with you as both a tuba player and as a composer is your interest in electronic and electroacoustic music. How did you first become interested in this kind of music? And when was your first encounter with someone doing, I've put in quotes in my question, electric tuba?
I think there's like two people that come to mind that really got me like the fire lit for me about that kind of stuff. And one is a guy that never does anything with electronics. It's all like acoustic effects, but it's Nat McIntosh.
Yeah.
Do you know that guy? From
I don't know him. I
Youngblood?
know the name. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, Youngblood Brass Band. For those of you out there, Youngblood Brass Band is the best. They got that song Brooklyn.
Yeah.
That one's great. But he's got number one, he's a great tuba player, but he does a lot of like effects. And with Youngblood, a lot of their early catalog is like New Orleans style brass band, but then there's a DJ. So there's like kind of like a marrying of the two things. You got this old school, totally analog, whatever, acoustic instruments. That's the way to phrase it. And then this new kind of blending hip hop DJ in with the brass. And just thinking back, that's what I listened to in high school all the time. So no wonder like that's my main focus now. It's like, how do I combine my interest in like hip hop, electronic music? How do I combine that with brass stuff? So he was the first one, and then
So
Wolf and Tuba. Sorry.
I just want to ask you, when you say acoustic effects
Yeah.
on the tuba, what do you mean by that? Because when I think of electronic effects, I think of like delay and reverb and distortion and all that kind of stuff. Obviously, when you put acoustic in front of that, it's something that the player is physically doing to make those sounds. Am I right?
Yeah. So he's like, I mean, it's basically extended techniques. So he's doing multiphonics, kind of like percussive vocal effects, beatboxing into the instrument. And he's got like this acousticon concept where he tries to sound like an upright bass on the sousaphone. But the way that he just can manipulate his sound, it's incredible. And so I try to do that on all the horns. Like if I'm playing F tuba, I can still try to sound like a string bass. C tuba, it's a little easier, but just trying to be malleable and like a chameleon for whatever ensemble that you're playing in. Listening to Nat do it just on one album, he'll show off all the different sounds that he has. It's like, oh, it's serving the music in a different way when he plays this way. If he puts a little bit more front on the note, it has this more style. If he's more focused on the sustain, it kind of gives this it's like more of a ballad, a little bit more heft to it.
Yeah.
So then I translated that over to my like just normal tuba playing.
Cool.
And then trying to combine it with electronics is what, yeah, that's where it started.
That's awesome. So there's Nat, and then there was someone else.
Yeah, Brian Wolf is the guy's name. He's got an act called Wolf in Tuba. And
That
so
sounds awesome.
it started out with, it is great. It started out with just like tuba and drum machines. And then he's sort of evolved too. So now he's got like a, I don't know what the brand is, but he's got like a little baby tuba, little itty bitty guy, a little tiny tuba, like a travel tuba, where he's got like a pickup mic drilled into it's either the mouthpiece or the lead pipe. I think it's on the mouthpiece, but he's like running his tuba through effects, and then he's got like kind of backing tracks going. But he's just really good at it. Brian Wolf. Yeah. He's one of the OGs for me. But hearing that and then coming to school, I was a music technology major. So it only made sense to combine the stuff I was doing in my tuba lessons with the stuff I was learning with Ableton Live and Max MSP. Because I could see that you can get signal into the programs. So I'm like, all right, let me get a mic on this. Let me run this tuba through this distortion chain that I just made in Max MSP and like see what it sounds like. And honestly, like for the first 8 years of it, kind of garbage. Like it's cool. You can get some good effects, but to like really figure out what sound you're going for and then try to achieve that, that's a different process. But I spent a lot of time in like the research department trying to see what works.
What you're describing is like the foundation which the rest of what you do has been built upon. And a lot of that foundation is going to be like experimenting, like you're describing.
And like just running acoustic tuba through all kinds of effects change just to make it sound like it's going down a garbage disposal or something. And for like a good portion of my career, that's what I wanted.
Yeah.
You know, how do I like degrade the sound of the tuba so much that you're like, what is this?
Yeah. Is there a philosophical reason that you wanted to make the tuba sound like literal trash?
It's interesting.
And when I say that, I mean, I don't mean that in a negative way, because I really appreciate when a composer, when an artist in general kind of makes the focus point degradation of something. I think that really illustrates something about the world we live in a lot of ways. Were you thinking about something kind of, I don't know, intellectual, heady like that, or did you just like the sound?
I think I don't know. There might be some more philosophical, like the punk rock aspect of it.
Yeah.
Like there was so much virtuosity with guitar in the 60s and 70s, and then it comes along to like grunge and punk. Like we're going to distort this so much that you can barely discern pitch. How about that? This is the lead instrument now. And so I think that, like, you know, I went to the undergrad, grad school, you know, studying how to make like the absolute best sound on the instrument, which I still think is valid. I'm still chasing that sound every day when I'm practicing. But I think the other side of me wants to like put a little bit of grit into it still. Like, what if you can still make a great sound, but then totally destroy it for the sake of art? I think that's fun.
That's great.
Yeah. It's a little punk rock for you.
When did you know that you wanted to pursue your craft as a career in the ways that you're pursuing it now?
You know, in undergrad, you don't really know. You have the fire for it and you have the taste for it, but you don't really know what it means to live day to day in this kind of a lifestyle. So I think it was grad school, like living in Tampa. That was really it. Because there I was combining everything that I said I wanted to do. Play the tuba, played with a few orchestras while living down there, taught a bunch at different high schools in Tampa, and then wrote more music than I've ever written in my life and put on those concerts. Like we just kind of like had like a little artist collective where we all kind of helped each other with our own projects, but we all kept busy. And I think that was really it, like that little cohort in Tampa. And I've kind of modeled my life after that. Everywhere I move, I find that there's like 4 or 5 people that are doing the similar thing and are still trying to like get to the next big level. And I've surrounded myself with those kind of people ever since USF. So you guys really started it all, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I would agree with all that. Do you find that the people in these cohorts are usually musicians or not necessarily only musicians?
no, they're not. Yeah, I'm thinking like dancers, visual artists, but they all usually are artists in some way. Because in Tampa, there were, we were mutual friends with a bunch of dancers, choreographers, visual artists. And yeah, that carried up when I moved to Rochester. I had like a similar group, a similar crew of kind of all disciplines within the arts. And I think you need that. You need to see like what they're kind of going through. And the most important thing that I picked up like working with dancers so much is they interpret sound so differently because everything for them is like visual movement.
Yeah.
And I had never thought to care how would inspire somebody to move. I'm like, I don't know, it's just a bunch of cool sounds I put together. Do what you want with it. And then seeing people like interact with those sounds, like, oh, maybe I could sculpt this a little bit more. Maybe there's a little too much information right here. And what they're really latching onto is
Yeah,
this
right.
particular line. So yeah, dancers, they're great.
Yeah, for me, the most extreme version of that, and in my work that I've done, is a mutual friend of ours and a mutual collaborator of ours, Sarah Walston. Sarah Walston asked me to collaborate on, I think, her thesis piece, which is how I wrote a piece of mine called Fastigia for bass clarinet and electronics, which is still one of my favorite pieces. But as composers, we can be, not always, but usually, very irresponsible about deadlines. At least that's been my experience. And so it created this really strange situation where Sarah was creating the choreography before the music existed. And so everything in that piece I composed after watching, like I soundtracked her choreography. It's like it was backwards
Oh.
from the way it normally is. And I would agree that made me think about the music in a completely different way, in a lot better ways, I think.
Is it usually like I'm trying to think like did Stravinsky and Nijinsky like was there some music before the Rite of Spring or were there some like choreography before the Rite of Spring? Because when you said that, I immediately thought I feel like the choreography came before the music for that piece, but I don't know. I don't know if that's usually how it goes.
I'm not enough of a scholar to know
God, I'll have to
to know.
Google that one.
Yeah. If you know the answer, write in
Yeah.
loose.leaf.transmissions@gmail.com. A
Uh,
shameless plug. That's how you get in touch with me.
no, that's good though.
So you've been releasing music under the name DJ Electro-Tuba for a while now,
Yeah.
and I'm guessing the DJ part is quite intentional because of a lot of what you do is, at least to my ear, it can be beat oriented. Not necessarily always, but it's quite beat oriented. And under this moniker, you tend to borrow from more popular styles of electronic music. So why did you begin DJ Electro-Tuba? What was the impetus for that?
I think I needed a way to like distinguish between music that I was writing with the intent of it being in a concert hall and then music that I was writing just to do something. So anytime I was like kind of cooking something up in Ableton and I was like, this isn't going to be on like a recital or anything like that, or I'm not going to perform it on a festival. This is just going to be like popular. Like I need something other than my name to put this out under. So that's where DJ Electro Tuba came from. And the name is just awesome. I think it's good. Good name.
Yeah,
Um,
it's simple. It makes sense.
I
We
think
know
it
what it
covers
is.
what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna put like different sound sources together, and there's gonna be processing on a tuba. And yeah, I started doing it, I guess, in undergrad, and then got away from it a little bit. Living in, I still did it in Tampa. I still was doing DJ electro tuba, but I started performing a lot more when I was living in Rochester, performing at just like different kind of like art spaces just outside of the school, outside of Eastman. Anytime I was performing outside of there with the tuba, I was calling it DJ Electro Tuba. And I had like a couple different sets. One where I was doing a bunch of Parliament remixes,
Awesome.
'cause Parliament rules, and Bootsy Collins, great bass lines. And then another set that I really loved was clipping. Are you familiar with clipping?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they rule.
Daveed Diggs is in
Yeah.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 So I was taking a bunch of their tunes, a bunch of their pieces, and kind of weaving a tapestry and just trying to like create some space for some tuba to kind of riff. But really, it was just an excuse for me to dig into the artists that I really love and see if I can like create like a collage of their music and add my own concepts to it. Another group I've done that with recently is the Avalanches, and then Radiohead. So I haven't really put those out. Those are kind of just me in my studio noodling. I'll put them out eventually.
The ones that come to mind that I really love is Party People.
Yeah, yeah, that's
It's
a
real.
Parliament tune as well. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you did Last Christmas with the Flintstones video that a
yeah, that
couple
was
of years
weird.
ago.
Yeah,
It
that's a
was
good time.
I loved it.
Yeah.
How would you say that DJ Electrotuba has evolved over the years? Because you talked about doing it in undergrad. At this point, I guess it's probably almost 10 years ago or more, and now you're still doing it, and you have a doctorate now.
Yeah,
And
Doctor
you've
DJ Electro Tuba.
Dr. DJ Electrotuba. Yeah, does I mean has it? I just imagine that it has undergone some transformation.
Yeah, and I think it should. Like as my tastes change, I think the art should change with it. So like my taste now, as far as like the DJ Electro Tuba stuff, the things I've been doing recently have been way more ambient, just kind of drony, a little bit of a rhythmic pulse to it still, but yeah, less chaotic. I think I'm kind of gravitating more to like soundscapey Brian Eno, Aphex Twin, early 90s kind of stuff. I think I'm calming down as a person. Not that I was ever riled up, but I think I'm definitely a little bit more in the pretty mindset when it comes to DJ Electro Tuba. And quick plug, part of it is that I found this plugin in Audacity. I don't know if I was using it in Tampa, the Paul Stretch. Have you used that plugin?
No.
Uh, I'm about to put you on. Paul
Please tell
Stretch.
me more.
Yeah. Paul Stretch in Audacity. I don't know what, it just doesn't, it's just like a time stretching. Like you put a sound in that you really like, and you can stretch it up to like 25 times. But like the way that it degradates the sound is very interesting to me, and it keeps it very pretty. There's still some artifact in it, but it's a good way. If you have like a 2-second snippet of a sound that you really love, stretch that bad boy out to like 3 minutes long. It sounds great.
Love
So
that.
yeah, that's a quick plug for Audacity. It's still the goat. I love that.
I don't know. I've been using Audacity more than half my life.
Yeah.
And that, we were talking about high school and doing stuff in high school. I was just thinking the other day about, oh wow, that was like my first workstation, Audacity, and I still use it for work today.
Yeah.
It's just it's a warhorse.
It's the best DAW if you know what you're doing. I use it all the time when I'm like at the beginning stages of a piece, when I'm just kind of generating material. Just throw it in Audacity, put some effects on it. It's really easy to clean up audio too. I was using it to check the levels for this. Just input monitoring. All right, it all works. Great. Let's go. That's the other thing. So that's what I teach in my electronic composition course. We're using Audacity and like free software that you can get, like SoundHack, Spear, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, Pure Data for
Another OG.
Yeah, I always love to hear teachers at your level really advocating for freeware, because it drives me crazy when I hear people asking their students to drop hundreds of dollars on a software just to learn it. I mean,
yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, it's not very inclusive.
Yeah, it's like, and everything costs now. Like you have to, like, if you want it on your machine, you got to figure out. But Audacity, you can still just download that bad boy. I think it's ridiculous that we're asking kids to drop like $600 on Ableton. Like that's a lot of money. Let's stay over here. And if the student wants to go get Ableton and work on it, I'm not going to say no, but I can't require people to do that. That's ridiculous. The world's expensive, man.
It is. Every day it gets more expensive.
Yeah.
So I mentioned earlier, and of course you know this about me, Brett, that in a former life I was a euphonium player.
Yeah.
And for those who don't know, a euphonium is like a smaller tuba.
It's a
It's
little
like
baby.
it's
Yeah.
a baby tuba. It plays in mostly the same range as a trombone would, and that was my instrument of choice in high school, into college. I even played a little bit in grad school before you got there, Brett.
Yeah. Where
You
did you
just did.
play?
I played in the tuba euphonium ensemble
Oh, with Jay?
with
Yeah.
Jay. Yeah.
Hey, sweet.
So, and I think because of me being a composer and a euphonium player, I have a lot of opinions, maybe controversial opinions to some people about the state of music being written today for tuba and euphonium. And we can dig into that if you want. But before I make a lot of low brass players angry, which I'm happy to do,
Yeah.
I can take the fall. We don't have to get you involved, Brett.
No, that's fine. That's cool.
What would you describe is the difference between what you do with tuba and electronics and what most tuba players might perceive as quote unquote tuba and electronics?
All right. I should warn you, like, this is what I did all of my stuff at Eastman about. Like, in my lecture recital was electro-acoustic performance. So
Nice.
let me know if I go too hard.
It's a long form podcast, baby.
Okay.
Let's go.
All right.
Let's go there.
All right. So most of the time, okay, well, I'm doing a recital April 2nd. I'm calling it a tuba and electronics recital. And basically what I want to do is show people what most people think with a tuba and electronics piece, and then show what I do. So the first half of the recital is all like instrument with a tape part. So as Paul Reller would call it, like a karaoke piece. And I think that's what most people imagine when they think of a tuba and electronics piece. It's a tuba player alone on stage with a music stand in front of them, and then either like two speakers behind them if they have got like a little portable kit, or if they've got like a house stereo PA, right? Two channels going back. Maybe they'll have a monitor, but that's like the entry level tuba and electronics, just a fixed media piece. So what I'm doing is I'm starting the recital with this piece by Patrick Cunningham. It's called Heavy Duty. I was part of a consortium for it, and this is my first time actually going to be able to play it. So that one is just, I press start on my computer, a track goes, I follow the cues, and I try not to miss notes. It's like smart music, which is great. Most of the pieces that I hear in that kind of genre, they're nice pieces. They do what they want to do. The next level I call is broken tape, where it's still fixed media. Like the media itself won't change, but the timing of it can change. So you give the performer a little bit more time to perform, be a
There's
musician.
flexibility,
Yeah,
right?
take time. I know you wrote pieces in that world. That's where that was like a big eye-opening step for me. It's like I can still control the events, but I can actually let the performer control the timing of things. So I love that level of electroacoustic performance. And then there's like the final level where you can do the first two parts. It can be a fixed media or like little broken snippets. And then you add live processing or video or whatever external thing you want to add to it. So those are like kind of the three levels. The third level, being the most inclusive, encompasses a lot of different pieces that don't get performed that often because it's usually more than just stereo. So you can have like quadraphonic, oct, you can have 5.1, whatever
Like
kind of
surround
setup.
sound, basically, right?
Yeah, you're increasing what's coming out, the number of channels coming out, usually live processing using some kind of DAW or like distortion loop pedals or whatever you want to do. And then some kind of like, fixed element. But I like to do a lot of stuff with video too. I'm still on the quest to find like a good generative video thing. I've been trying to get something where I can just play and the audio is reacting or like triggering stuff in my video. I can get like 60% of what I want, but I can't figure out the final step where it's cool and like more than just like grids with shapes showing up when I hit a certain amplitude. I was doing that yesterday. I spent like 6 hours yesterday in Ableton. There's a bunch of like Max for Live devices you can use in Ableton for video. and I got one that was like somewhat cool, but it takes forever. What's your question? Oh,
Yeah. The
formally.
difference between what most tuba players think of when they think of tuba
Gotcha.
and electronics, and how your tuba and electronics, what that is.
Yeah. All right. All right. So I was using my recital as like kind of like a scaffolding. So my first piece, tuba and electronics, Patrick Cunningham, heavy duty. And then I'm doing, and I'd actually be curious your thoughts on this. I haven't disclosed this publicly to anybody, but I'm doing the Hindemith tuba sonata, but there's like a Frank Zappa-esque accompaniment for it.
Whoa.
Have you heard
Yeah.
that?
No, I love what you're describing though.
It's great. All right. It's
Yeah.
this guy named Josh Oxford, taught at Ithaca. He might still teach at Ithaca, but he made this accompaniment version for a tuba player named Aaron Tyndall. And then I have those files and I'm putting it into Max, and I can trigger, all the sound files within the movements and just kind of like play the piece by myself. So that's like the broken tape piece. I'm doing a piece with video. I'm doing Debussy's Syrinx, if you know that piece. But that one, I'm trying to get the live video figured out where the tuba, I want it to be not amplitude based, but based on the frequency that I'm playing in the kind of effects. And that's really hard to do because you have to mic it the same way every time you rehearse the piece, so that if your mic's too far away, it won't get the low end content as well. You're like, dang it, I wanted the colors to change in the low register, but it's not. But I'm working on it. I'm tweaking it.
Yeah.
And then
Nice.
I'm writing a piece for it, tuba and electronics, where I'm performing with Ableton Live, a lot of processing, some video elements as well. And I'm doing something else on it. I don't remember. Oh, Andrew Noseworthy.
Oh,
His
nice.
piece. They Want to Be the Actual Sun.
How would you say your tuba playing influences your compositions and vice versa? Because I know that as someone who was a performer for an extensive amount of my life, thinking about the performance aspects of what the player will have to deal with is a big part of how I approach what I write. So, do you feel that way, or are there other ways that the tuba influences what you do?
I mean, I feel like it if influenced everything I wrote up until like a couple of years ago. Most of the time I was writing tuba pieces just for other instruments, if that makes sense. And the person that got on me the most for that was Balgender. He's like, this is just like another tuba piece. I was like, dang it. All right. So I had to get away from that. So now when I'm writing music, if it's not for the tuba, I'm trying to like, I play like a little game with every piece that I'm writing. Depending on what music I'm obsessed with at that point, I'm trying to write a piece in the style of whatever my obsession is. So right now, I like Bruckner a lot. All right. So I'm writing a piece for a tuba euphonium ensemble for this workshop we're doing at the end of the month. And it really sounds like if Bruckner was commissioned to write a piece for tuba euphonium ensemble. Like that's what it sounds like. But yeah, I'm trying to, with my non tuba pieces, make it sound like a tuba player didn't write it, because that's what I was doing for like 10 years. So I'm trying to get away from that a little bit. So I'm writing this like chamber ensemble piece right now for a festival in June, and I'm just trying to do totally new compositional practices with it. I want to write a new piece, you know.
Yeah.
I'm trying new tricks rather than doing the same thing I always do. Cuz I hate that, like listening back to a couple pieces in a row of yours from like years ago. You're like, "Oh, that sounds exactly the same." Cool. We just did a recital here, electronic music recital, and I played two pieces, one from when I was at USF and then one from when I was at Eastman. I was like, well, these are the same piece with slightly different sounds and a slightly different duration, but
Yeah.
they're the same piece. So trying to get out of that. When did you stop writing euphonium pieces? Like when did you like transcend that headspace? You're like, I'm just going to write a piece of music.
Yeah, I think it would have been grad school as well when Balgender just started really putting the euphonium down. I mean, he still does it. He has a grad student right now at Penn State who's a euphonium player. This kid Gabe. Gabe is awesome,
Yeah.
and Balgender gives us both a hard time. I was in the same room with Gabe and Balgender was just hating on the euphonium
Yeah.
at us.
Yeah.
so, um,
Good.
so yeah, I think that must have been it. But it's interesting because I do have quite an extensive catalog of low brass music, and people will you know commission me for low brass pieces. And I almost want to say no, because I've become so far removed from that world. But kind of the way I approach them now is, how can I pick up where I left off with the last low brass piece, but through the lens of all the work I've done since I wrote that piece? And that
Yeah.
always, it's always interesting. And I'm still always like unhappy, I'm unhappy with the result, because it's like, this just sounds like like a low brass piece.
Uh-huh.
But I try to use it as an opportunity to, one, push the envelope on what I've previously done with those instruments, and two, nudge what has been done in totality for those instruments, just nudge that forward a little bit.
Okay.
Because I feel like, and this is where I'm going to make a lot of people maybe upset with me. I feel like the tastes of tuba players and euphonium players are quite conservative, and oddly enough, they are really great about commissioning composers. They just have bad taste. is my opinion, and that's coming from someone who loves those instruments and has played a lot of that music. And I just, what I would like to see, and what I try to do when I have an opportunity to write for those instruments, is just do a little bit better than what we have done so far.
Yeah. And it's I don't know, that's such a tough thing, because when I was a student, it was, I think, a little easier to be like, I like new music. I like newer ideas for the instrument, because that's what I want to do. There's like two camps. You can like try to do the classical route and maybe be a little bit better than the person that played the Vaughan Williams tuba concerto. Like, try to recreate that, maybe add your own flair, or you can just do something totally different with the instrument. But now I'm trying to live in both worlds, both lanes, because I got students and maybe that's their thing. They want to play like the standard pieces. And with those students, it's really important for me to like sprinkle in, like, have you checked out this piece by this composer who like I know, and I hit up on Instagram and I'm like, hey, can you send me whatever? This is a living person. Check that out. Maybe you'll like that. And it's just hard because, especially with other instruments, you've got this canon of like truly great pieces. And I don't want to poo poo the truly like landmark pieces. I'm like, that is awesome that it exists, but our job is to write the next one,
Yeah.
like get the next one, the next landmark piece out there. So I think some people just don't want to put their energy into finding it, or like trying to really create it, because a piece is only as good as like the performance and the perception of the piece. And a lot of times, I think, as low brass players, we do these commissions, we play the piece and we just try not to miss notes. You just try to like do the instructions on the page rather than turn it into like a piece of art. Because something happens with new music performance. And I was just listening on the way here. I walked to campus because I'm like, not that close. It's a little far. It's like an hour, and about halfway here every time. I regret walking, but it's good for me. I was
Yeah.
listening to Stockholm Chamber Brass. They do like a lot of contemporary stuff, but
Yeah.
the thing with them is when they're playing newer contemporary pieces, they keep the same mindset. Like, every note still has the story in it. And a lot of times with new music, I think people are just trying to play at the thing, and they just want to like show like technical proficiency and forget we're trying to like do something. We're trying to make some art out of this. And I think that gets lost a lot of times in contemporary performance, especially like low brass. I feel like we're the guiltiest party for that. Like, we're just trying to show that we can do the piece. Like, hey, we're doing new stuff on the instrument, but we forgot that this is art, and we're ideally doing something with this sound that we're creating.
I will say, and I haven't thought about this in a long time until this conversation. Part of the reason I wanted to be a composer was as a way of rejecting the virtuosic showpieces that have been written for euphonium. And I'm thinking, I mean, the composer who comes to mind mostly is Philip Spark, and how everyone loved to play Philip Spark. And it was like, here's how you can tell I'm a badass, because I can play a bunch of notes. And I was just like, that's not me. That's not who I am. That's not who I want to be. And I couldn't find something that resonated with me. I couldn't find any music that really resonated with me as a euphonium player. And so I just started writing music for myself. And a couple of my first big pieces for the euphonium was for me to play. Most recently, 10 years ago, with Basic Research 1,
Yeah.
which I have a great video of you performing on my YouTube channel. But
At the Venture
um,
Compound.
at the Venture Compound,
Yeah. With
yeah,
Alex
R.I.P.
Ravitz on the, I think on the
R.I.P.
producer credit,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
that's right. But yeah, I think that speaks to what you're saying about, you know, when I hear that virtuosic music, it's just like notes, 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 notes. Like just play at the music, play at the audience. And sure, there's musicality behind that, but at the same time, like if you want to be an athlete, go play a sport. You know, and not to like be too deductive there. You know, I don't want to paint with broad brush strokes
Sure.
because there is value in that music,
Yeah.
but at least for me, that's how I started what I wanted to do.
Yeah. I mean, it's your reaction to hearing that kind of stuff. Because I did the same thing. Like I knew listening to people like Oystein Bodsvik, who's like a fantastic tuba player, virtuoso. But listening to him, I'm like, I will never be like, I will never do that. Like, I don't think I can, I don't want to go down that road. And so a similar vein, like I started kind of writing pieces that I wanted to hear. I wanted to hear like a certain kind of sound with tuba. So like maybe I'm going to be the guy to get that sound. Maybe I'll be the person to write the piece that does the things that I want it to do. So yeah, it's a noble quest, I think. But a big thing that I've noticed with our friend group is that we all have a super, I don't know, robust imagination
Yeah,
for like the sounds that we want. That part is really hard for me to teach, like tuba or electronic music. You just have to like develop your tastes so much that your brain is overflowing with these ideas. You just have to like find some venue for these concepts that are in your head. And for the tuba, there's a word that actually works pretty well for this, Klangvorstellung. It's like the concept of sound that you're hearing in your head. You're like oralizing this world that you have to get out. And that's stealing from Pauline Oliveros, just to give her a shout out. Oralization, like getting a concept of sound in your head and trying to find a way to represent that in the physical world.
yeah,
It's so fun. It's
it's awesome.
it
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great.
Well, and it comes that's when like anytime you work with students and being students ourselves at one point, you know, the whole listen to everything. You know, when I first got to grad school, that was my task. Like I didn't know anything that was going on. Here's a universe, learn it.
Yeah.
And just listen like crazy. And I still, you know, I have been lucky enough to make a big part of my living listening, you know, and discovering great music. And then that's made me a better composer, just being aware of what's out there so that you can craft that universe in your head that you're talking about. You can craft what you want it to be. And then the challenging part is like getting it out. But
Yeah.
but listening to as much as possible and informing what you want to do as an artist is vital.
And it's not just listen to everything. It's literally listen to anything that you can get your hands on and decide, do I like this? What do I like about it? Can I do this with my own music? And if you do that with every genre of music that you come across, you're going to develop your own taste. You know, Balgender was also good for that,
Yeah.
having us
Amazing.
listen to a bunch of pieces.
Yeah. This is the perfect segue for my next few questions. Actually, what would you say is an artistic object? So, like a piece of music or a song, a book, piece of art, you know, anything like that. Just a artistic object that, not to be too dramatic, but kind of changed your creative life. Kind of just like opened up the world for you. Just changed the game, the way that you approach your creative work.
Okay, it's a good one. It's a good question. Let me stall for a second here. All right, two things came to my mind as you were saying artistic object. The first one was that Alex Ross book titled "The
The rest
Rest
is
is Noise."
noise.
Yeah, the rest
Yeah.
is noise. That book was great. Kind of listening or reading about like a modern person talking about classical music, and their interpretations of it. And then a piece of music that I think really did it for me. Are you familiar with Goretzky? Yeah, the Sorrowful Songs, his Symphony Number 3, Symphony of Sorrowful Songs from 1976, that piece. And then there's like a reimagining of that piece by Colin Stetson. Have
Yeah.
you heard that?
I have not heard that, but I was going to say you yourself have reimagined that piece
Yes.
often.
I get obsessed with pieces of music, and that one had a hold on me when I first heard it in grad school, actually at USF. Balgender said I should listen to that piece because it starts out with this huge canon that keeps like developing, and that piece kind of taught me patience and finding a sound and really trying to like exploit it, like blow it up and see how much mileage you can get out of one kind of like sound world. And just I love that piece. It's a great piece. And then in grad school, I kind of like re-stumbled upon it when Colin Stetson released that album Sorrow, I think in like 2016. And then I had to like recreate it on the tuba because I was just listening to it every day. And for some reason, like when that happens, when I get like stuck on a song, I'm like, okay, I have to do something with it. I can't just like keep starting my day and like, all right, what am I going to listen to on my way to whatever? All right, it's the same song. So I like turned it into like my lecture recital where I recorded all the parts, played the vocal. There's like a soprano soloist part in the first movement, well, in all the movements, but uh, recorded all the background parts on tuba and then performed the soloist part with some effects for my lecture recital. And it was fun.
It's interesting hearing you talk about how this piece specifically opened you up to the ways, like I think you said, to draw out sound.
Yeah.
And hearing you talk earlier about kind of starting to lean more into ambient music. Do you think there's a thread there?
I think so. Well, I've always liked ambient music, but I've always been afraid because I didn't know like how to like there's like imposter syndrome. Like I can't put this out. Like I just put a couple sounds together and now I'm calling that a piece. Is that's not music? That I can't do that. But now I don't care. Like you can call
Yeah.
whatever you want a piece of music. And yeah, do you know Sigur Rós?
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah.
specifically Yancy from Sigur Rós. He's got this album called Rice Boy Sleeps. It's incredible. I've been listening to that for like 10 years at least. But that album is incredible. And it just shows me like you can do this. You can like put this out. It is simple to put in quotes because there's not a ton of ideas, but one idea is good enough. Like one solid concept that you're going for, I think is enough. So I like the ambientness for that. It's more pure in my brain, monochromatic, but sometimes one color is pretty. So I dig it. Yeah, Sorrowful Songs. That piece rules. It's so sad.
I'll put a link to it in the show notes.
Hey, there you go. It always makes me feel something. It's not always the same thing. You know what I mean? Like I come to it. It's a piece of music that changes me. Like I have to approach that piece rather than it, coming at me.
So this is a question I'm asking everybody. What would you describe as the primary pillars of your creative practice?
Well, recently it's been trying to do what we were talking about earlier, where the second the piece starts, you're like in a different space. I like pieces that feel like you're stopping time and you're no longer aware of seconds and minutes. You're just kind of like experiencing a sound. So that's what I've been trying to achieve a lot more with my electronic compositions, trying to see how long I can make a piece or how long I can do an idea before I feel like I lose the attention span of people. I mean, I just presented on a piece that I just wrote in our composition seminar. And that was one of the big concepts that I was trying to get at. Like, how do you repeat an idea enough so that it doesn't turn into like a Steve Reich kind of like phasing piece? And it's not just, a still motionless kind of a piece. Like, how can you use repetition and not lose attention span? If that makes sense. And then with the tuba stuff, I'm trying to write a piece that sounds like a beautiful piece of music that happens to be on the tuba. I'm really conceptually, and this is all just my own kind of like compositional baggage, but I'm trying to stop writing the same kind of tuba piece over and over again And so what I'm doing is I'm kind of messing with form a little bit. I notice that a lot of my pieces do the same thing structurally, and so I'm trying to upend that. And can I tell like a little secret about one of the compositional tools I've been using?
Please do.
Might be controversial. I don't know. I don't know your thoughts on this yet. We haven't talked in a while, but I've been using some artificial intelligence to kind of break me out of my own habits writing pieces. So using Chat GPT to generate a form or like a structure. It's not very good if you say like write me a melody because I don't know, whatever. But it is good if you're saying like so like an example for a piece that I just wrote. It's like write a piece or give me a structure for a piece that sounds like Brian Eno and Aphex Twin got together in a studio to write a tuba piece. And
Yeah,
it's kind of interesting to see what GPT thinks would happen there. And then I usually take that as like a starting point and then try to generate material that fits within that structure. But that's been fun. Like I'm basically just using it as a compositional partner. Like, is this a good idea? How would you flesh this out? And then it'll give me some garbage, but that'll usually lead to me coming up with an actual good idea.
sure. Yeah, I have complicated thoughts about artificial intelligence because on one hand, I'm concerned it will want to eliminate us one day. Um,
Yeah, maybe.
that's a little weird to me, and of course the concerns of replacing artists. I think capitalism and corporate entities will want to use artificial intelligence for that reason, and I can't get on board with that. But what I will say, and what I love about what you just said, is I too in my writing I have used Chat GPT as a tool. I have plugged in what I've already written, and I have said, "Can you?" Sometimes I literally ask it this. Sometimes I ask it this in other ways. Can you make this spicier?
Yeah.
Can you make this more engaging? Can you make this more interesting? Like, can you help me tell this story a little better? And you're right, it will spit out kind of trash a
Yeah.
lot of times. Like it'll be like, oh, this sounds like it was written by a robot.
Uh-huh.
But you can then cherry pick. So that's what I've been doing.
Yeah.
Just here and there, not in a big way. But what hearing you talk about it as a composer reminds me of is this long history of systematic composition, of algorithmic composition, and how composers have used systems. I'm obviously the one that everyone knows about on the surface is the 12-tone composition system of Schoenberg, right? And so composers have used that quite literally, like here's my 12-tone row and this is a piece of music. But also, as you know, composers have taken that tool and extrapolated different things out of it. And same thing with when we talk about algorithmic composition with like Maximus P coding, all that kind of stuff. That's your wheelhouse, not really mine. But I know enough about it that, and I know composers who have algorithmically composed. They've built this thing in this program, this code that spits out music. And again, some composers, that's my composition. And then others will say, okay, now I have some musical material. Let's take it from there. So, what you're saying about using artificial intelligence as a tool, that's what it reminds me of. And
Yeah.
that's something I've actually never thought about before.
It's like so if the piece is a campfire, I use like the artificial like Chat GPT as a way. It's like crumbling up the newspaper to start the fire. I've got like the scaffolding, I've got the logs kind of already there. I just need something to kind of like get it going a little bit. So I'll do that just to like spark an idea. It's a lot like what is the John Cage, the I Ching? Is that the book?
Yeah.
It's like another way to like get material going. Or like the 12-sided die. If you're just trying to come up with pitches to start improvising with and turn that into a melody or whatever you're going to do with it. I look at it like that. It's like it gives me enough clay that I can then start to sculpt a little bit of something. I'm like, oh, I can use this for this part of the piece. Great. I got something out of it. So it's helpful in that way. But yeah, it is a little worrisome. It could be used in nefarious ways. I'm interested to see what turns out, what like happens as it progresses. because I use it a lot for images too. Like what I'm doing with the Debussy, the Syrinx piece, I'm like putting these prompts into Chat GPT, and it's using DALL-E. I'm like, create an image that looks like, Goethe played the tuba and was talking about the Pan, myth, the Pan myth in Greek mythology. Like, what image would come out of that? And then I'm putting that into like Adobe After Effects for like part of the visual.
Cool.
So it's a nice little tool.
One of my favorite things that I see you doing online and sharing with other tuba players, especially, are these tools to help players with their fundamentals. And I'm thinking specifically of your long tone warm up type stuff
Yeah.
that you have created, like electronic backing tracks too. Can you talk a little bit about how you've used your compositional sensibilities and aesthetic to create resources for students and as well as pro players? Because I see professionals kind of gravitating towards what you do as well.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's cool to like see other people using it. So yeah, basically, what I'm doing is using these very old school fundamental routines, like these exercises. Can I talk about like brass pedagogy a little bit? Is
Sure.
that cool
Yeah.
with you? Well, okay.
Yeah.
There's like 7 main areas of fundamentals, so that I try to work on every day, and I encourage my students to work on. So it's like breathing, mouthpiece buzzing, long tones, articulation, dynamics, and I'll include range, just like dynamic range and like high note, low note, flexibility, and then have I said? I don't think I've said scale chromatic patterns, but I'm trying to like develop exercises so that I can work on all 7 of those areas every day and not get super bored out of my gourd doing that kind of stuff. So I just, during the pandemic, I started putting together these little backing tracks for my favorite books. Mastering the Tuba is the one that I started with by Roger Bobo. And by doing that, putting it online, people were like, oh, this is pretty nice. Can you do this exercise? Can you do this book? And so once I got through all of the requests that I got from people, I started just making my own exercises because that's fun for me. I just wanted to every time I pick up the horn, I start the day by just noodling around, just kind of playing and seeing what kind of mood I'm in for the day. And eventually, like, you kind of start playing the same things. And until I do something with it, I'll just keep repeating it. So if I write it down and turn it into a thing, I like finish it and I can move on mentally. So that's what a lot of that is. It's like the warm ups that I was doing just kind of on my own, put a backing track to it, throw it up on the internet, and see what happens. And it's cool. Like, people seem to like it.
Yeah. I wish when I was in college that I had that, because that was the thing I disliked the most about being a euphonium player. I sound like I hated being a euphonium player. I guess maybe a little bit, but
Yeah.
I was pretty good at it. So
Yeah.
but I really didn't like the maintenance, the fundamentals. I didn't have the patience for it. I would have rather had been spending my time doing something else. So the idea of doing the chores of being a musician and having this kind of fun way of doing that, maybe would have been a game changer for me. I'm not saying I would still be playing euphonium, but I think, yeah, it's cool. I like it.
Like, there's 2 things. Anytime like I talk about this in like a public setting, I've given like a lot of master classes and talks about this kind of stuff. But anytime I bring it up, there's 2 things that I want people to take away from it. Number 1, like just having fun playing the instrument and doing the things that will help you get better. You should find joy in that, and hopefully playing along with the tracks is helping with that. And then number 2, it's like, hopefully it's, to use our favorite word, inspiring. Hopefully it's inspirational and just showing you like, hey, do this on your own. You can do this. I'm just a guy that has a laptop and uploaded it to YouTube. Like, you can do this too. Write it out, see what happens with it. There's no like secret to I was gonna say there's no secret to being successful. I don't want to say that they've been super successful, but you just got to do it. Just got to do the stuff, see what happens with it. I've got a new series coming out called Sonic Foundations. That's like a full routine with backing tracks. Like, I don't know when I'm going to put it out, like either today or tomorrow. It's done. It's sitting on my computer, and it's one of those things where I just have to like ramp up the mental energy to like put it on my website and like post
Yeah.
about it and stuff.
So by the time people are hearing this, it will be in the world, out in the world.
Yeah, it'll probably be out and I'll probably be like super rich and successful based from it.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
So I want to kind of come back full circle here because you have talked a little bit about your formative years in Iowa, and you are now back teaching at the University of Northern Iowa, which is where you went for your undergraduate studies. So, what's your return to the school been like now as a teacher?
It's weird because every time I've had to answer that question, it's been to people at the school. So my
Yeah,
answer's a little, different.
like political. Yeah,
Yeah, it's like, "Oh, this is a great school." But it's weird. It's really weird because a lot of times when my students are talking to me about things that are happening here, my immediate response is like, back when I was here, we did this." It's like they're having their own experience. It's different than when you were here. That's fine. That's the way it should be. Academia should evolve. But yeah, it's been really weird. And it's hard to like get out of student mode, if that makes sense. Because a lot of, and I think it's just me, like it's just how I am. I want to go to everything I see. And I don't see a ton of other professors at just like random recitals and events. So I do feel a little weird just showing up to like random recitals and master classes, but that's still like interesting to me. Like I still want to go to everything. I still live by like the John Cage rules. Go to everything, read everything you can get your hands on. And so it's weird mentally for me to like say like you should be more professorly. I don't know what that means. It's like what is, because when I talk to my colleagues, like the way this school is set up, I'm on the second level and there's only like one hallway of the second level and all the brass faculty are up here with me. So it's cool just like talking to them about what they're up to when they're not teaching lessons. So it's like being an adult student. And I think I'll always be in this mindset of feeling like a student. Like I still have weekly assignments that I give to myself, but I think as long as I stay in this mindset, I'll stay in academia.
yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, do you see yourself in any of your students? I mean, do you? I don't know. Are there any little Bretts running around?
That is a good question because I do. I don't know. I was a little strange because it's small. And a lot of these programs, like high school band programs, don't have the same kind of resources that I saw in New York or Florida or Texas, having worked in like high school programs in those states. They just don't have as much awareness as to like what possibilities there are. Because a lot of times with high school musicians in Iowa, their musical mentors are their band directors, which makes sense. That's who they interface with the most. That's who they see in the profession. But then they meet someone like me. And like I had to be a weird adjustment for these students because I'm not doing that. Like nothing about my career has been traditional. Nothing about anything I do is traditional. So when I came in with my like lo-fi beats for warm-ups, there was a lot of like kind of like looking around the room like what are we doing right now? I'm like, "Hey, this is nuts and bolts. This is Arbin's exercises. This is the Remington warm-up just with a beat." All right, it's nothing crazy. It's just a new way to conceptualize these ideas. And so when I talk to my students about what they want to do for a career, they're like, I'm music ed. I'm going to go student teach when I graduate. And then I'm going to be a band director. I'm like, okay, well, you could do this. You could go down this route. You could be like a more of a performer, arranger, that kind of thing. You could turn into Theon Cross. He's an like electric tuba player. He does a lot of jazz stuff. So now we've got a student in the studio that's really into jazz. So I'm trying to like nourish that a little bit more because there's stuff you can do with jazz on the tuba. Like I just had an album come out February 15th with NewStream Brass, and that's like half jazz, half classical brass ensemble stuff. So a lot of what it is, I'm just trying to show them that there's so much more that you can do. And in Iowa, there's just not a lot of visibility for anything other than the music ed route right now. But it's getting better, you know? I think not that I'm going to change the culture here, but I think I'm going to show people that you can do some other entrepreneurial kind of ventures and make a career out of it. Because that's the goal.
Yeah.
Like
Oh, of course.
I do drive this point home with all of my students, but you want to set your life up so that you love your day to day. If you don't like Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, what are you doing? Sorry, but like what you have to do whatever you can so that you love what you're doing when you're working. Because what I do when I work, like today's a work day for me. I came here, I practiced, I'm doing this interview. I've got like a work block in the afternoon where I'm going to write music. That's what I'm working for. That's how I'm like living in a house, getting groceries and stuff. So it takes a lot of work, but there's ways to do it where you enjoy it.
Yeah.
Have you read Chop Wood, Carry Water?
No, but it sounds awesome.
It's like one of those kind of like bro-y motivational books, but it's so great. Talking about becoming a samurai, kind of. There's a really great kind of like parable in the book about what's Koda. He's like a Japanese architect that builds houses, and he's coming to the end of his career, and then he's realizing like, okay, this next project that I take, it's going to be my last thing. I want to retire. I want to go live somewhere else. So he builds the house, but he kind of like does it halfway because he knows he's going to be done at the end of it. So he's not doing everything. He's not in love with the process of building that house. And then when the house is completed, his boss says like, hey, good job on this house. I know you're retiring. Great. As a gift, he hands him the keys to the house. He's like, that house, that last project, that's the house you just built for yourself. And then he's just like hit with regret. He's like, I wasn't in love with building this house. Now I don't love this house. Like, what have I sold myself short. I didn't know I was building it for me. If I knew I was building my own house, I would have done this totally differently. So I guess the lesson is like, build the career that you want, do the thing that you love, and do everything you do with love so that you build the house that you actually want to be in.
Mm.
Whew.
It's heavy.
Whew. Yeah.
I love it.
It's a good book. You got to check it out.
Yeah, I'll check it out. So you kind of mentioned Chat GPT already as a tool that you've been using recently. Is there a tool that more generally that you use in your creative practice that you think everyone should know about and that you think everyone else could also benefit from?
For the tuba side of things, Tonal Energy Tuner. Do you know that tuner app?
No.
Okay.
I don't play instruments anymore, man.
Okay.
I'm done.
I love that app. I love it for a lot of reasons. Just to get a little techie, they have a harmonic analysis portion of the app where you can see what overtones are present in your sound as you're playing. So I use it all the time. This isn't super related to anything, but just throwing it out there.
Yeah.
I use it when I'm doing my long tones and stuff to see, because with the tuba, you want a lot of the fundamental, right? You want like the dark, the heft, the width of the sound comes from like the fundamental in that first partial, but all the color in the sound, like if people say you sound dark or bright, comes from like the higher overtones. So if I'm trying to get a more colorful soloistic sound, I'm looking for the higher end harmonics, and that app shows you that like as you're playing, which is incredible. I don't think students today will realize how big of a tool, how great of a tool that is to be able to actually like physically see the sound that you're getting and how you can manipulate it. That was a big tool for me, coming up with like an orchestral tuba sound. What does it look like on the app? Like, how does it show up harmonically? And then when I'm trying to be more soloistic, new music-y, what does that look like? So Tonal Energy Tuner. And then compositionally, I'll throw out Cecilia. It's a really good way to manipulate sound sources and generate new material. So if you need some more firewood for your campfire or your piece that you're building, that program is great.
How do you use that for what you do?
So I'm primarily composing in like 3 levels when I'm doing electronic composition. I've got like a background kind of like tonal color for the piece. I've got a mid-ground where there's like some melodic fragments, some like kind of filler rhythmic stuff, and then a foreground, which is what I want people to like pay attention to the majority of the time. So I'll use Cecilia for the backgroundy, droney stuff. It's a good way if I'm using like Paul Stretch on a certain sound source. It's a lot of tuba sounds, just to
Yeah.
be, frank. It's a lot of like pedal C stretched out 3 minutes and then manipulate that. So it's a way you can like automate effects on a sound really fast. And there's different settings. You can put like a drunk setting on the automation. So it's, messing it up for you. And you just get really interesting results.
What do you think you would be doing if it wasn't your art? If you weren't a musician, what would you do to make a living, you think?
Well, I don't know if we talked about this, but I was really close to not going to grad school.
No,
Did you
we
know
haven't
that?
talked about this. No,
So
I didn't.
when I was a senior, no, I might have been a junior in undergrad, I got an internship. So part of my music technology degree, you take classes on it, electronic composition, all that stuff. But it was like very recording heavy as well. So I did an internship at a studio here in town with a name that is eluding me. Anyways, I got another internship working at a video game studio where I was like a sound designer for slot machine casino games. And right when I started working there, they launched this app for casino slot machine games. So I almost stayed because they needed another full time sound engineer. I almost stayed and did that instead of going to USF. So a lot of times I think back to that because I was like, oh, I was just talking to the guy in the parking lot when I was leaving my internship. He's like, hey, so we're going to hire a full time guy. Would you want to like maybe do that? And that was in that moment. I was like, I need to decide this like now. Am I going to stay here or do I want to like continue on the path and see what happens? So I decided to continue on the path and see what happened, but I could have stayed there. I think that would have been fun, but that's still kind of music related. So I don't
Yeah,
know.
I mean that's still it's being a sound engineer is very different from. Well, it's not. It's I guess it's not actually that different from.
But it was like that's how I didn't want to do it because a lot of my day was like implementing sound into code. And like that was fun, but it wasn't the most fun. And I couldn't compose outside of the key of C or G. And I couldn't compose anything more than like a minute and a half long. I was like, yeah, I want to make more sound more than this. So that's why I didn't want to do it anymore. It was fun though. It
Yeah,
was a good time.
that's cool.
And if I wasn't doing that, like I've been a cook a lot. Like most of my jobs outside of school, because I've always had to work outside of school. They've all been at like baseball parks, cooking hot dogs. I worked at a bowling alley when I was at Eastman, slinging pizza and getting gutter balls and stuff. Yeah, I could have done that. I like the kitchen life. That was fun. And my parents are both cooks, so that made sense to me. But then I got good at the tuba, so it all worked out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean a lot of times people will joke that the alternative to playing tuba is cooking hamburgers anyway. So
Yeah.
there you
I did that the entire way through.
go. It's parallel.
It was great.
Brett, man, this has been really amazing, and I've appreciated getting into the weeds a little bit
Oh, we got in there.
with tuba. Yeah, but my last question for you is, and it can be whatever you want to say. What is something that you've never had a chance to share about your art that you've always wanted people to know?
So I've kind of talked about it a little bit in like pre-concert spiel, introducing a piece. But I think with a lot of my music, there is a sense of like tongue in cheek or like a little bit of a sense of humor. And that's something that I feel like people don't always try to include with their music, try to be like a little lighthearted with it. Because with contemporary classical music, there's this trope of it's all very serious, it's all very angular, pointillistic, aggressive. But I think sometimes it can be pretty funny too. I think back to a lot of Stravinsky's works, like the ballets. I think a lot of that is supposed to be kind of comical. I think kind of funny. And a lot of my favorite composers seem to have a little bit of a sense of humor with their music. And I don't think we should be afraid of that. I think that's also part of the human experience, finding things funny or comical or unexpected, and that leads to a little bit of humor to it. So I try to include that because that's like a lot of my approach to life is try to have fun with it. Like we can be heady, we can be serious and talk about stuff, but it can be funny. You can not take it as seriously and still get the job done. So a sense of humor with the music, I think, is the biggest thing that I'm trying to still convey with my music and in my just like day-to-day teaching. Both things you can be productive and have fun doing the thing.
Love that.
You know?
I love that.
But yeah, try to be funny. Write a piece that's hilarious.
We can all probably stand to be a little less serious about.
I mean, if that's your
things.
voice, you know, I appreciate when people are serious and like sincere with their music all the time, but I've tried to add a little sparkle, a little bit of sense of humor to it. That's what I'm going for.
Brett, thanks again for your time today, and I'm really glad that for as long as we've known each other, I'm glad that this has been an opportunity for me to learn more about you, things that I didn't know. So thank you for that.
Yeah, this reminds me of like just hanging out, eating lunch, because I'm sure we've had almost this exact conversation with like bologna sandwiches outside at that.
Yes.
Remember that beach on campus?
Oh yeah,
or just by the little duck pond.
Beach.
So this is cool. And it's great to see that you're like doing it. You're like really, you're the poster child when I like talk about careers, like building a thing that serves you. Like, look at this guy. Look what he's doing. Everything you put out. I'm like, yeah, that's a Tyler project.
I appreciate that. It's taken me a long time to recognize that in myself. And it's a lot of hard work, but yeah, I really appreciate that. All right, so if that sounded like a conversation between two dudes who hadn't talked in a while and we're catching up a little bit, well, that's pretty much what it was. But I also think Brett brought up a lot of really thought-provoking things that I know I'm going to be using in my own creative practice, and I'm sure maybe you will as well. Brett Copeland can be found online at brettcopelandmusic.com, and you should also give him a follow over on his YouTube page. Just search for Brett Copeland _music on YouTube. I'm Tyler Kline. Thanks so much for joining me for this episode of Music Maker. Music Maker with Tyler Kline is a production of Loose Leaf Transmissions, made for all ears. We're online at looseleaftransmissions.com. You can find more episodes of the podcast and ways to support us on the Loose Leaf Transmissions website. That'll do it for this episode of the podcast. See you next time, folks.